Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are doing another unhaul. Now, I'm going to be honest, I really haven't taken any of the books from my March or April unhaul to the used bookstore because we're still in shelter in place and have been since mid-March. But these are books that I already know that I'm going to take as soon as I can, so I figured I would continue to show them to you until I run out of books to talk about. So that's what we're doing today. And this one is actually slightly unusual in that this is much closer to an actual, like what you would generally think of as an unhaul, because I literally pulled them off of my shelves. I decided I didn't want to reread them, or I didn't want to read them in the first place. And those are all the books that I'm going to talk about today. So let's start with the books that I do not want to reread. And the first is Freakonomics by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. This was really interesting. It finds the connections between things that seem to be unrelated and explores that connection as to why it is. So, it says they do say correlation doesn't equal causation, but sometimes it does in some unexpected ways. This was really interesting the very first time that I read it. However, now the mystery is kind of gone, and so I don't really feel a need to reread it. I read Freakonomics. I've read Super Freakonomics. I enjoyed both. I plan to read When to Rob a Bank, which is also by these authors, and enjoy it. I just don't think I need to own it anymore. After that, we have The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. This is essentially the idea that there's a magic moment when an idea or trend or social behavior crosses a threshold and tips over into spreading like wildfire. Now, this is a very interesting concept that is not as universal as Malcolm Gladwell puts in his book. Now, I really enjoyed this the first time that I read it. However, since then I have learned that, again, it's not as universal as he makes it out to be in this book, but also there have been some very negative unintended consequences for people, especially people who are in neighborhoods that are predominantly people of color. And so knowing that, I just do not have any interest in rereading this. After that, we have Enchanted by Alethea Contis. This is about a girl named Sunday. She is the youngest of 7 siblings. And to kind of deal with her plight, she writes stories. She goes down to some body of water and she finds a frog and they become friends. She tells them the stories. One day she kisses the frog and it turns into a prince that her family hates. And this prince has decided that he is going to woo Sunday. From what I remember, this is either young adult or like middle grade. And I thought it was okay. It is part of what is supposed to be a 7-book series that was stopped after 3 or 4 books. I don't know if the publisher I think the publisher dropped the series. I don't remember exactly. But I was already kind of about it. And then the fact that it's an unfinished series, there is no timeline. Like Alethea Contis has said that she wants to self-publish these books, but there is no timeline for when this is going to happen. And then just kind of how she talks about the realities of being dropped by your publisher makes me feel like she doesn't understand that that's part of the reality. Like, that it's very, very unfortunate, and I would be absolutely devastated if I wrote a book. Oh, I was writing a series and then it got dropped in the middle. Like, I would have all kinds of feelings. But it also feels like she doesn't really understand the reality of the publishing world, which is a huge turnoff for me. So the fact that I was already iffy about this series, a series that may or may not ever finish, I was just like, I don't need to keep this. And then after that is The Last Kiss Goodnight and Black and Blue by Gina Showalter. This is book 1 and 2 in the Otherworld Assassins trilogy, which is a paranormal romance trilogy that follows different characters in each book. Now, I enjoyed these well enough when I read them. They are much more steamy, on the steamy side of things, which doesn't terribly bother me. But I was always thinking I would read the 3rd book, and the 3rd book never came. Now, Gina Showalter has said that she would love to self-publish, but she needs a lot of time to learn how to do that, which is totally understandable. But it hasn't happened in multiple years. I didn't think this was so amazing that I need to continue with the series, and so I'm not going to. However, can we just take a moment and really appreciate how beautiful these covers are? They do it for me. I really like them. So those are also leaving. After that, we do have books that I decided to just I'm never going to read. And that is, the first one is Splintered by A.G. Howard. This is an Alice in Wonderland-esque story where we are following one of Alice's descendants, Alyssa. And madness runs in her family, and now she's got to go into Wonderland to defeat it. And I actually put this on my monthly TBR, and then I realized that description was, I should look into how this book portrays mental illness, because that description, man, and one of the consensuses was that the mental illness in this book is very much sensationalized. And I knew that that would make me really angry, and so I am not going to read this book. After that, we have The Tiger's Curse by Colleen Houck. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. But this follows Kelsey as she tries to break a 300-year-old curse on a tiger. And that didn't seem so bad. And then I went and read the Goodreads description, which is a little bit more in depth. And it turns out she's going to India, and the tiger is actually like an Indian prince and all this. And I was like, oh, this kind of smacks of white savior badness. And so I looked into it, and that was generally the consensus. This is just so racist, and which is really unfortunate. And that the other thing that people tended to point out is that Kelsey is dumb as a stump. And I was like, with the race, between the racism and the stupidity, that's generally not my kind of book. And so I am just not going to read this. After that, we have Firebird by Mercedes Lackey. Now, this is a retelling of a Russian, I believe, fairy tale or folk story, which is all fine and good. Not a problem. But I realized that fairy tales have a very particular style of how they're told. And so I did some research into it. And yes, this is told very much in a fairy tale style. So it's very, very atmospheric, and the story itself is sometimes a little bit meandering, which is the kind of thing that makes me sad when I read it. It's just not for me. I don't enjoy atmospheric reads at all, generally speaking. And so I decided that I've never read Mercedes Lackey, and this is probably not the right place to start for her. And then after that is The Native Star by M.K. Hobson. And this is an Old West fantasy steampunk kind of story. And I really can't even give you a proper description of it, because I've just kind of decided that I am more or less done with steampunk. I have been burned so many times. I'm kind of just done. Now, it's not to say I won't read steampunk in the future, but I will be reading a lot of reviews for them and making sure that it is, in general, something that I would want to read. And I remember reading the description of this and thinking, I just don't care so much about this story. And again, steampunk and me, we do not get along as much as I would like. So this is leaving. And after that is The Clockwork Heart by Drew Pagliasotti. Now, this is one that I actually have read 10, 20 pages of, and it is about a female person who has mechanical wings, and she saves somebody, and it turns out that somebody is really important. This is also another steampunk, and when I read it, it very much had that steampunk feel, and so it's just again, I've been burned too many times. I'm not invested in this story, and I just don't care. So this is also leaving. After that, we do have The Diamond Secret by Susan Wynn. This is part of the Once Upon a Time series. This is a series that, again, I've been burned before. It is very hit or miss. Some of the authors are amazing, and some of them are just not as good. Now, this is a retelling of the Anastasia story, which is not a story that I'm all that into. Generally, I'm not drawn to Anastasia's stories. So it's like a hit or miss series with a story that I'm not drawn to. And I was just like, even when I received this in the mail, I looked at it and was like, it was probably a mistake for me to get this book. And I have no interest in reading it, so I am not going to. After that, we do have The Last Mortal Man by Sin Mitchell, which is the first book in the Deathless series. This is actually the only published book in the Deathless series. For whatever reason, this book is the only one. I don't know if it was dropped by the publisher or if it was orphaned or what happened, but for whatever reason, this series was never finished. And that I just don't want to get into. The first book of a series tends to leave things a little bit open. It's never as clean of an ending as I want from like a standalone. And so because of that, I know that I will read this and just be so upset that we don't have anything more. So I'm just not going to read it. The premise is really interesting, just that we're in the way future, and there's nanobiology, basically nanobots, from what I understand, that kind of help you stay, as long as you have the money to pay for them, they help you stay healthy and young. And then something happens and a pandemic is sweeping through, and people are having problems with their nanobots, and it's up to one man who does not have nanobots to kind of unravel this mystery. And I did think that was an interesting enough premise, but again, it's an interesting premise from an author I've never heard of, a book that I've never heard anybody talk about in a series that was orphaned. So I'm just not going to read it. And then lastly, we have Shadow Ops, Control Point by Mike Cole. This is military fantasy. You guys, I have no idea if I'm going to like military fantasy, but gut level, probably not. Now, I did start reading this. This is one that I read about 20 pages in. And it felt military. That is a bonus. If you guys like military fantasy, this might be a good one for you. Because it did feel military. But unfortunately, I do not have positive associations with the military. And so, like my spouse was actually in the military. And while there were definitely some good things that came from it, there were also a number of things that had a negative impact on our life. So I don't really like things that feel very military. And so this kind of gave me feelings that were not positive when I was reading it. And additionally, the author, Mike Cole, he also, I just have issues. So, he made a mistake, and he admitted it a couple years ago. He basically came out and said, this is a thing that I did. These are some things that I have done. It is a problem. I recognize that it's a problem. I apologize and I pull back, which was all the right things to do. But now I have this slight distaste for him because he made the mistake in the first place. And I don't want to penalize him for making the mistake. However, I can't pretend I don't know. And I don't know if he's actually changed his behavior. And I don't even know how I would research if he's changed his behavior. And so, it was nothing illegal. I want to be very clear. Nothing illegal, but things that I personally do not appreciate. And so it's like, if I'm going to give Mike Cole a chance, I want to make sure that I'm doing it with a book that I feel that I'm very drawn to. And this is not it. It's a genre that I'm not sure I'm going to like. It's a book that I stopped reading, more or less DNF'd, from an author that I'm not sure that I'm going to enjoy. That I already have these, slight feelings of dislike for. That's just not a good combination. So I am not going to read this. However, if I do read military fantasy and I find out that I actually like it, I will give Mike Cole a chance. But that is it, you guys. That is all I have. Let me know down below if you think I am incorrect on my opinions. If you think that I should keep any of these, please let me know why. Or if you agree, then also let me know. reaffirm my decision to let them go. But that is it, you guys. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.